REW, how are you? Good. All right. So there's probably a lot of you in this room who know that during the pandemic, kind of as a coping mechanism, we started these roundtables with editors, and then they got, on a quarterly basis, they got kind of popular, so we added the podcasters. And RE+ asked us to do the 14th quarterly convening of clean tech podcasters and editors from the stage live. So we're really psyched to bring you this panel. And I gotta say, after 37 years of talking to journalists, the definition of journalists might have changed. So we've gone from full-time professionals to include part-time hobbyists. But the thing that, it just never gets old talking to them, because I find that people like our panelists they have keen observational powers, and together they form a mirror for us to see ourselves and our companies and our sectors in their eyes. So this is one of the rare times you get to ask them the questions. And we already have a lot of questions been submitted ahead of time, but I do want to encourage you, if you have a question you'd like the panelists to answer, my colleague Melissa Baldwin, Melissa, can you raise your hand? We are. So email her at melissa@tigercomm, tigercomm.us, and she'll aggregate the questions. If we don't get to them now, I'm going to lean on our panelists to maybe take a little time next week, and maybe we'll just do a quick online chat and make sure all the questions get answered. So I want to thank you all for having us, and thank our panelists for coming, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. I'm Mike Casey, and I'm the founder and president of Tigercomm, and I host the podcast Scaling Clean.
Great. Thanks so much for having me. I'm Julia Pyper. I'm the Vice President of Public Affairs at GoodLeap. We are a fintech company financing distributed clean energy solutions and sustainable home upgrades, from solar to drought-resistant landscaping, windows, doors, batteries, geothermal, you name it. That is my day job now. I used to be a full-time journalist. I was a journalist for over 10 years, working for the now gone Green Tech Media, which is a great opportunity, but I get to continue doing some journalism through Political Climate, which is a podcast I host and produce that's supported by the USC Schwarzenegger Institute here in California, and distributed by Canary Media. So we cover the politics and policy, of the clean energy transition.
My name is Scott Cooney, and I'm the founder and former CEO of Clean Technica. We've been covering clean energy for about 12 years now, and cover everything. We're mostly focused on electric vehicles and battery tech and mining and minerals and that sort of thing now, but still have our hands in everything, and I'm just really happy to be here. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, my name is Nico Johnson. I'd like to also thank Mike for convening us. I've been called a convener, and I think Mike has definitely one-upped me in convenership. So it's an honor to be here. I started. It's always a joke I think in podcaster circles. Folks look at us as journalists, but I started in solar. I started a solar company. I've developed gigawatts of solar. I've been focused exclusively on building out the solar revolution. So when I started a podcast as a hobbyist 7 years ago, I never imagined that it would become my full-time job. And I called myself on that page very aspirationally the voice of the solar revolution. So now 530 episodes in, I would definitely say that we've grown into not only the voice of the solar revolution, but the clean energy revolution. And shameless plug, we're also live podcasting from the stage at the Power Up Media Zone, booth 438. And at 5:30, Mr. Porter and I will be doing the daily roundup. So if you can't get enough of our sultry voices, then you should head over to the Media Zone at 5:30 and watch us drink beer and talk trends.
They are so sultry. You guys really do podcast.
You're up. They can hear it.
All right. Aloha, folks. So nice to be here. Thanks, Mike. Real pleasure to be spending time with such amazing people and journalists. So I would categorize myself as just your general solar hustler from Maui, pretty much. About 5 years ago, after having installed solar for nearly a decade with my small solar installation business in Maui, and seeing the move up of NEM, and then post-NEM, and into all the new tariffs, and then trying to figure out how to put batteries into solar systems on the grid. Then I said, hey, we should do a radio show about this, because it's pretty complicated, and people need to know about what's going on with this technology. So we did a weekly radio show called The Solar Coaster in Maui, and it was a great experience. Recently, we've transitioned into more film projects. We just installed the Solar Edge home system on my place in Makawao. Amazing technology. I can tell you all about it for hours. I won't do that to you. Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Jon Powers, really excited to be up here. I'm the president and co-founder of Clean Capital. We finance clean energy projects that are long-term owner-operators. Over the last few years, we've invested over $1 billion into solar and storage projects in 25 different states, including Hawaii and Guam. We've just invested in a developer in Alaska. We're doing a lot of brownfield work. And I'm also the host of a podcast called Experts Only, which I started a couple years ago now. And I started it more out of curiosity to have conversations with colleagues that I respected in the industry that were doing interesting things. And we focus on the intersection of solving the climate crisis through energy, innovation, and finance. So what are some of the next innovations that are coming, whether it be electric vehicles or solar or storage or the Internet of Things? And luckily, we've had a pretty decent track record. I started just for myself, honestly, personally, being completely selfish. I wanted to have these conversations, and it's turned into a really great, fun platform. So.
That's the biggest hack of podcasting is you just get to talk to brilliant people and get to borrow their time. Totally. I shouldn't be saying this out loud, but it's
true.
The Cribs notes of the energy transition.
We're also all hosts, so we take the mic from Mike.
Okay, well, you don't get off that easy. We're going to do 2 questions everybody has to answer, and then we'll start going to questions we've gotten. So we always start off our roundtables with this question. What are the 3 big trends you're tracking that you think are important, and what do you think makes them worth tracking? Julia?
Right. So I'm deep in Inflation Reduction Act land. We cover politics and policy on political climate, as I was mentioning, and also in my day job now. So 3 big trends I see coming out of that. First of all, the electrification of everything. There are now renewed tax credits for home electrification. It used to be a one-time $500 tax credit for your home heating or upgrade of some kind for efficiency. Now that's $1,200 every year, $2,000 for an electric heat pump. So that's gonna, and again, it's every year. So you could upgrade one thing one year, decide to do another upgrade the next year. It's more in line with, I think, the way consumers actually purchase things, and they'll have incentives available to support that, in addition to new point of sale rebates that we'll see roll out. So I think this could be a massive movement to literally affect 120 million homes across the country that could take advantage of some measure for electrification in the IRA. The other one I'd point out is more low-income expansion. We've talked about, people are probably aware of adders for clean energy projects to be built in lower-income communities. There's also this $27 billion for a new greenhouse gas reduction fund. Those dollars are meant to target, in large part, lower-income communities and finding new solutions to deploy clean energy there. The Loan Programs Office has $40 billion available, even more, I think, in Loan Authority. That has to target new and innovative sectors of the market, could be low income as well. So that's a major focus of this bill in a way that I don't think we've ever seen policy focus before. And then finally, this is not, an Inflation Reduction Act only. It's, I think, American industrialization policy and innovation policy. And we can talk more about that in a moment. But the U.S. has historically underfunded innovation. It has not met even its own goals on that front. The combination of the IRA with the CHIPS Act, with the infrastructure bill, is, I think, going to unlock a whole new era for U.S. innovation to build here, deploy here, and then export abroad in a way we haven't seen before.
All right, Scott.
Yeah, I mean, the IRA is incredible, and we're all kind of keeping an eye on it. And it has so much for so many things, including heavy-duty trucking and home efficiency and electrical upgrades and that sort of thing that aren't getting as much press as a lot of the other credits that are in there. We're really looking at pure BEV sales numbers, and I think that's been really super interesting. I think we've hit peak PHEV. So PHEV sales have actually started to decline in some areas where BEV sales continue to rise. In Europe, we saw pure BEV sales as the only segment of auto that was still going up, despite like a 17% drop in total auto sales in the first half of 2022. So we're watching that trend pretty closely. China, their pure BEV purchase rate is exceptionally high, and one of our editors ran some numbers and found that within 5 years, if the trends continue as they are, almost all new car sales could be BEV, which is kind of amazing. Wow. We're watching new energy coming on the grid. I think that's one of the biggest things in terms of wind and solar coming on the grid, represent about 70% of new power coming on the grid. And that's awesome. It's an amazing thing to watch. But yet, we still have 30% new gas coming on the grid, and that's something that obviously we're concerned about. And then I think the third thing we're really fascinated, our executive team gets together and talks about is the European transition. It's been really interesting watching the war in Russia, war in Ukraine, obviously, impacting so much of the European Union. And at one point, Cuba went through a special period where they got cut off from Soviet oil, ironically, and they had to go through this special period of transitioning to a cleaner economy. There's a great documentary called The Power of Community about that, and I see a lot of similarities between that and a much more technological revolution going on in Europe right now and the stuff that people are talking about. So it's kind of this main stuff that's got our attention, or at least my attention.
Nico?
So there are a lot of answers to this. If we have to pick 3 trends, I'm going to pick one recent from an interview, and another that has seemed to be a trend across interviews, which I think is what Mike is trying to get from us here, and then a third that I bring up in every single Clean Tech Roundtable, because I get to be first. The first is something that we haven't thought about in the capital market in a while that presumably collapsed relatively famously, and that is yieldcos. And I was interviewing Andy Redinger from KeyBank, the largest project finance provider in North America, and he suggests that in about a month we're going to see yieldcos coming to market again. And those yieldcos are now non-dividend trading yieldcos. And why is that important? Well, there are a lot of reasons why it's important, but among them, the collapse of the yieldco market was essentially because we didn't train the markets in how to handle the asset and to treat it like a long-term asset. So when hedge funds jumped in and then saw that the market was not quite as robust as they expected, saw that prices started to go down, they jumped out and it collapsed the market for yieldcos. These non-dividend trading yieldcos will be traded a whole lot more like real estate, and they will essentially be traded on net asset value. And there's some debate around whether they'll be traded on EBITDA or net asset value, but I thought it was fascinating that the concept of a yieldco, which I had pretty much written off as not gonna come back for renewable assets for a while, is in the next month going to be something that's probably in the periodicals that we'll be reading about in terms of the kinds of assets that are being funded through these not so new mechanisms. The second is a trend that I think we've all seen, but with the passage of the IRA and the incentive for 30% for storage projects alone, not coupled with solar, the tail is truly finally wagging the dog. I think that what's fascinating about it is that the storage projects are a much more high density per square foot, right? So less real estate that you have to go and wrangle as a project developer, right, John? So what does that mean from an interconnection perspective? It means that you can lock up interconnection, and in particular on, if you're looking at energy communities, you can lock up interconnection that maybe used to be now on retired fossil fuel plants, where you can deploy storage very quickly and relatively easily, and capital is pouring into energy storage because it does provide so many benefits. And then you can start working on the concentric circles of land that allow you to expand the clean and free electrons that pour into that storage and provide grid stability. And then the third, and I won't expound on it very much, but I think that green hydrogen is the meta trend happening right now in renewables. And I'm glad that I got to go first to say that. But green hydrogen, at least on our podcast, since we did the series back in December on green hydrogen, I get approached 5 to 6 times a week for someone who wants to talk about green hydrogen. And every respectable renewable energy platform that I know has a renewable, if not like a skunkworks team, a full-on green hydrogen, like 50 to 100 person team really working on green hydrogen. So I think that trend is going to be a juggernaut.
All right, Josh.
Okay, very good. So let's see here. When I can't quite get away from how excited I am about just the technology in the home right now, right? So you go back 5 years ago or 2015-ish, in Maui, we reached that post-NEM era, and it was, how do you put solar plus battery on homes? And it didn't really exist. And the utility goes, hey, you can get these tariffs, no problem, self-supply. But we're out there dealing with 10 different companies trying to cobble it together. What is remarkable, especially with what I just came off of with the installation in my own home, is that these technologies are so robust. they're so robust. I mean, we're at a place where the grid literally could be backup. And I know that because I live it right now in my home in Makawao. And so when I think about a system that has, like an 11.4 inverter with a 200% DC-AC charging ratio and 22.8 capable on roof, you can throw half of that into an EV, full onboard capacity of a Tesla onboard charger, right? And then the other half of it directly into 10 kilowatt hours of batteries. I mean, the fact that you can do that in off-grid mode, in kind of the most elegant system design, these DC coupled systems that I've seen, is just fascinating. So the whole solar plus battery, home, ownership of energy, and then the movement towards the electrification of transportation, right? These have integrated EV charging systems. There's probably 24 similar types of systems on the show floor today. We got through 3 interviews in the morning, and I'm like, I have no idea how we can meet everybody, because it's just expanded so much. So that type of technology, I think, is remarkable. And there's a phrase that keeps coming into my mind just about the family, just the home, right? Abundance of energy. What happens when you're no longer starved in an electron-scarce environment, but energy is everywhere, and energy, it's like looking for work to do. All of a sudden, you're going, what do I do with all this energy? Do I put in a bunch of Bitcoin miners? I know it's a touchy subject, but don't do it. What do I do? Do I put in an atmospheric water generation system so I can back up my catchment system? Do I charge multiple EVs? Right now, a 97 kilowatt hour battery bank in an F-150 was 39 and change plus destination. Then, of course, the tax credit came in, and now it's 46 and change or whatever it is. But the bottom line is that's a 100 kilowatt hour roving battery, right? That's spectacular. You put that in there in a self-supply system like in my home, and my system actually curtails because it's so powerful, right? So it's like it goes up in the morning, boom, everything gets charged, everything gets ready to go, and then it curtails because I don't have enough loads, right? So if you put that F-150 in there, or if my wife gets a Tesla or a Chevy Bolt at like 30K post-tax credit, whatever, these are value-oriented purchases, right? They're amazing. They're not elite things, okay? That, to me, is a megatrend that's awesome, the abundance of energy for the family. I think that's remarkable. Now, on the large scale, we did go out, okay, so Oahu, I think about the renewable energy mandates, 100% renewable energy mandate for Hawaii. Hank was just here on the last session. He had a major hand in that. Big shout out to Hank for all the work he's done at Blue Planet over the years. And we have these 100% renewable energy mandates, but a place like Maui and Kauai and Big Island can hit that for sure. Oahu is a little tougher because we don't have the actual deployable space for solar. So people have been talking about wind a little bit. We went out to Vineyard Wind, met with the guys there, learned about the projects they were doing in offshore, and tried to figure out if that was something that was possible like in a place like Oahu. So big wins, number 2. I think that's very, very exciting. And number 3, very briefly, I'll say, the developments that I'm seeing happening in stealth around the country, like full actual communities, multi-hundred unit homes, some affordable LTM, low to moderate income stuff, some rental stuff, some actually home and vacation and elite stuff, but really coming in with storage in the individual homes, software layers to control everything, interacting with the utility partnerships, developers, utility, the homeowners, the communities, all in partnership, developing what are essentially smart cities. They're not calling it that, but that's happening. Wow, so those are my 3 trends.
All right, John, cleanup.
I'm not going to answer in a bucket of 3. I just want to step back and look backwards for a second. And I think Julia mentioned, obviously, if there were 3 trends, it'd be IRA right now. But I like to think back to the evolution of the industry. Right, here we are, there's 25,000 of us out here celebrating the IRA passage and the future of the industry, but what has happened over the last decade plus to get us here, right? Our industry barely existed before the Energy Security Act of 2008, right? That passed, then the Recovery Act hit, and the idea of pouring dollars into shovel-ready projects that happen to be green under the Obama administration helped really get things to start to become cost-effective, right? And then people at the time didn't know if there was enough, didn't know, if there was enough sun in New Jersey to put solar up, didn't know if these panels worked, couldn't spell PPA, and we're trying to finance these things, right? Now, flash forward, a few more years, people were getting more sophisticated at it. Solar installers and others were getting more trained. You had an industry starting to grow, manufacturing was starting to grow. Programs like Sunshot brought the cost of these panels down significantly, and the market continued to grow. Then the Trump era came in, and all of us were, oh my God, this could be the end. Instead of that happening, we pushed through. Corporate demand for renewables skyrocketed. because of public pressure to address climate change. So you had companies like Walmart and Apple and eBay and so many others chasing renewable goals that now some are over 100% of their operations powered through renewables. That was unheard of a decade ago. So that's sort of the last decade. Now, where are we going to go going forward? The IRA is a fantastic sort of juicer for our industry. We had all the right trends going in the right direction, but I sort of see four sort of key things. One, ESG capital is flooding our market in a very interesting, exciting way. We need $1 trillion a year investing into clean technologies that help solve the climate crisis. We're not even halfway there yet. So how do we manage that inflow of capital and make sure that we still have projects that work financially for investors and others? Two, the job market. Many of you, I know we're hiring. So many companies I know are hiring. We have to start looking beyond. I talked to a headhunter yesterday who was really talking about looking beyond our industry. How do we find folks from oil and gas? How do we find accountants that might be working in real estate, right? How do we find a modeler that might be from a REIT that we can bring over? And we as companies need to take the time to educate them on our industry.
Hear, hear.
And we really need to grow that job base and diversify that job base. It's something we're really focused on at Clean Capital, is bringing that diversity and really trying to grow the folks that we're bringing into our team. Third, one of the trends that we haven't had yet is supply chain. I don't think anyone anticipated what hit us during COVID. So how are we going to hit, so many projects are delayed right now. So how are we going to get them back on track and hit the numbers that we need to hit to be able to deploy the capital, deploy the projects? And then I think the other sort of high-level ones that are exciting to me is the emphasis in IRA to address climate justice and make sure that we're bringing this clean energy revolution to all communities. So how do we include them in things like community solar, low-income, moderate housing? Most folks can't afford an electric vehicle today, right? How do we start to bring that? Maybe we really push up the electric bus fleets, right, and ramp up public transportation. All those things will help bring our revolution to all communities. And then fifth, I think it's really important for us to continue to innovate as an industry, but don't wait. So we can't keep waiting for the next thing. We have the technologies today to solve the climate crisis. We have the capital lined up to do it. We need to deploy, deploy, deploy. And for a future conversation, I want to talk about tax equity, but that's a really nerdy thing, but a critical part of our industry that is going to be a stranglehold on us for a little while, and how do we get to expand that so that we can continue to expand projects.
All right, I think we're going to switch the second question, just anybody who wants to answer, because as you can tell, these unopinionated, shrinking violets, they don't have much to say. So we're halfway through our session. Josh, the good news is if you have excess power at your house, I hear utilities all over America want to buy your power at retail rates, just saying, particularly ones in California. All right, so question. The IRA was a huge win. We caught the car that we've been chasing, miraculously. But with any change comes unforeseen consequences and bottlenecks. So it seems to me we've got 5 bottlenecks right now that are in front of us. Permitting. Brookings, Princeton have both said it's the #1 barrier is getting stuff built. 2, transmission. 3, storage. 4 is mineral refining, and 5 is workforce development. How are we going to fix those?
6, tax equity. We throw 6 out there.
Anybody want to take? How are we going to fix those?
No
At
pressure,
the same
Julia.
time.
All kinds of pressure.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot in there. I think there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic. I think we're still having a bit of a COVID hangover on some of the supply chain issues. So some of that I think will start to get worked through. You still do see China shutting down certain portions of its economy as they still cope with the pandemic. So hopefully some of that is pains as we continue to evolve out of this moment. We still will have to closely watch the tariff issues, obviously. Minerals is a bigger issue. I think we're going to see more innovation on that front, including domestic mining here. Lithium Valley is a concept here in California of using the salton sea to start developing and bringing up our own resources here at home. That brings up its own kind of permitting and siting questions and energy justice, issues involved with that as well, but we could see more of a build it here, make it here, mine it here as well revolution, and tracking with blockchain and other ways to make sure we're doing that ethically around the globe. So I think there are solutions to all of those things. Not my area, but when it comes to like permitting, I think we have a bigger education effort to do to get the public on board, because we have to build a lot of stuff. Deploy is what we have to do, but it's not always easy. These are people's backyards, it's their homes. I was doing some work in Arkansas. There's discussions around whether clean energy projects are helpful to farmers or not. And our view is just give them the choice. If they want to pursue it, that could be a really valuable route for them. But we have to have these conversations. I think it starts really locally, and as companies and nonprofits and trade groups, we're going to have those local conversations, because it's not just going to happen automatically. So we're all ready to go, but we have to bring everyone along with us, and let's not take that for granted, or we will really run into roadblocks we can't overcome.
Anybody else on those barriers? John?
At a high level, I think we as an industry have to really stop acting like an alternative industry. We are now a mainstream industry.
Hallelujah.
We're growing, which means there's a couple key things we all need to do as players of the industry, which is make sure our voices are heard. We need to advocate. We need to get politically active in states. You know, we do a lot with both solar and clean capital, for instance. We need to support the work SIA is doing in Washington. We need to help spread the message of what we're, you know, one of the biggest solar congressional districts happens to be Kevin McCarthy, right? He's done shit for us, right? As an industry, we need to get in front of him in his hometown and tell him why he needs to change his positions, right? That's not easy to, I guess there's a camera, I probably shouldn't say that, but he's not done shit for us. I'm gonna say it to the camera. We need to get in front of these
You
folks
can bleep that out,
and
right?
tell the story. And as Julia said, you know, we're facing a often fossil-funded campaign in places like rural America, where they're putting out misinformation on Facebook that's keeping developers from being able to go in and put on projects. Well, we need to get out and advocate against that, tell the stories of what our industry is doing in a positive way and how we can help farmers and help others. But that involves politics, right? We need to get politically active. We don't have a strong enough set of PACs in our industry. I serve on the board of the Environmental Defense Fund Action Committee, which is very focused on a bipartisan solutions for energy and climate. We need to be out there supporting candidates that support our positions. And if they don't, we need to call them out on it and continue to push our stuff forward. But that happens, the American Petroleum Institute has no qualms of doing that. Right?
None whatsoever.
We as
John,
an industry are just starting to really start to do that anyway.
To your point, here's a data point. The 2020 election cycle was a $4.4 billion cycle in political spending. ACPA's PAC raised and spent $320,000. SIA spent $180,000. And that's not for lack of trying on these organizations' part. It's not an indictment of the associations. It's an indictment of the will of the people in the industry. Yeah. $180,000 divided by 4.4 billion is 2/10,000ths of a percentage point.
So there's some hats coming around.
Right, so just try that on. You know, PAC spending is not the end all be all, but the point is, it's a leading indicator of the fact that we're pursuing policy outcomes without political power, and that makes you a beggar. Like, you're begging, you're hoping Chuck Schumer's really good and he's going to put you at the top of the list. But that's not the way politics works. A good 70% of politicians have no ideological mooring, despite what they say on TV. They just respond to pressure. So we have no juice with the 70%. That's an important point here. Let's just go to audience questions here. Melissa, do we have anybody who's put in a question yet? We got some we got beforehand.
How can you see Melissa?
She's out there somewhere.
Hey, can you hear me?
Can.
Yep.
Got it. Okay, great. Thank you. So our first question is from Mike Orshin with Breeze, and he asks, what is the best long-duration energy storage solution that works at a reasonable price right now?
All right, who wants to take that?
Best is a really tough one, right? But I can talk about one that's really exciting. I think that there's no silver bullet, right? So you're looking at storage solutions that maybe are specific to a given region, a given geography. So for example, in Kauai, you have KIUC, President David Bissell working on pump storage hydro. And I'll take a sentence from Doug McLeod, former energy commissioner of Maui County. He said, we're no longer talking about a kilowatt hour, we're talking about a megawatt month, right? So we're moving to a place where we have pump storage hydro. What a remarkable technology. That is resilient in an environment where you have elevation changes and plenty of deployable space for solar. You can move it up during the daytime and run it through a turbine afterwards, and basically you have storage, right? In another environment, a different show we worked on was out in Washington at Douglas Public Utilities District. They have the largest electrolyzer deployed presently in the United States, 5 megawatts, Cummings, and they have a run-of-river project, and it's a small utility, but they have some of the cheapest, if not the cheapest, electricity in the country, and they have excess power, and they can go ahead and produce hydrogen. That's great long-duration storage, essentially, right? So those are two things that are on my radar. I don't know what you guys are seeing out there, but I like seeing things outside of just simple, battery storage, for example, right?
I was going to point to the project you mentioned in Hawaii because it's more than pumped hydro. It's a combination, and it's like, I think all in, it's an AAS project, and it's 8 megawatt hours, which I believe right now is the longest duration storage project in the U.S. at least.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, a question came in before the session. It's about lithium refining constraints. Mineral refining capacity is being questioned right now in the wake of the signing of the Inflation Reduction Act. Is lithium going to be able to be refined at scale to meet all these goals for electric vehicles? Scott
I've
Cooney,
never heard
sounds
of
like he wants to answer.
theoretical. I don't know if there's a threat. There may be a limit where we just can't meet that demand, but I haven't heard of that. It's more of just how do you ensure you have stable supply chains, enough resources at an affordable price that's not subject to energy security concerns. A lot of our minerals come from hostile regimes. So how do we make sure that as we transition, we're not setting up another set of issues? Now, I think they're all solvable. Let's remember that we rely currently on our existing system that I think we saw in the opening session is still 70, 80+% reliant on fossil fuels, which also come from largely hostile regimes to the United States and global markets that are very volatile and cause a lot of pain for consumers, as we see at the gas pumps and et cetera. So there are solutions in the clean energy sector, and the best part is a lot of them are recyclable. You can reuse them. Unlike a fossil fuel that is burned and gone forever and we tore up mountains and that's the end, you can actually reuse the minerals and resources that go into EVs and solar modules, et cetera. So yes, we have a lot of, I think, supply chains to set up, but the good news is they can be done, and then the product is a smaller amount than what we use for fossil fuels and reusable at the end of the day if we set up that supply chain too.
I agree. And with the IRA, that of course is the burning question. And I think what's great about the IRA and the hostile regime thing is that it really set a tone for innovation. We've said by 2024 we're going to do all, it has to be American-made batteries. So we'll see how we get to that. But I think it's going to do a couple of things. One, there's innovation. Bosch was just talking about building a green hydrogen backbone across the United States for long-haul trucking to relieve some of the challenges around lithium extraction. So, if a semi-truck needs a giant lithium battery, it's going to take up a lot of lithium. So there's going to be ways that if we can somehow take into effect not making the perfect the enemy of the good, then we can look at some alternative suggestions that really maybe are not the most economical. Elon Musk loves to poo-poo on stuff like green hydrogen for an infrastructure for charging for long-haul trucking because it's not the most efficient. But when it comes down to it, it's also secure against Russian aggression with energy policy. So I think we need to look at a lot of different alternatives to relieve some of the stress on the lithium supply. As Julia was pointing out before too, if we're gonna develop domestic supplies of lithium, there's gotta be a balance. There's gotta be a balance of indigenous rights and environmental degradation that comes from those mines. But at the same time, let's not make the perfect the enemy of the good, right? There's no perfect lithium out there. So I think we need to open our eyes. We need to be a little bit more creative, and I think we need to potentially accept things that are not perfect.
Got another question came in. There's been a lot of buzz about the upcoming offshore wind auction off the coast of California. Once the lease areas are auctioned, developers are be seeking an off-taker. Given the size of this state's offshore wind planning, how important is it for policymakers to formalize a pathway to market for the long-term success of the industry?
I'm by far not an offshore wind expert by any means. I think only thing I would say when it comes to the policymakers is the more certainty they're putting in the market today, the better those projects are going to be financed with cheaper capital, making the power coming off there more efficient, right? And if people don't know where it's going, the folks that are going to be financing that, it's either going to be government backed or super expensive capital that is going to make it really high cost of power coming up. So certainty is key.
Sorry, just a quick shout out for the USC Schwarzenegger Institute that supports my podcast. They did a whole report with the American Clean Power Organization on the potential for California offshore wind. And these are floating turbines, I think, due to the depth of the water. But they outlined and hopefully has an answer to the asker's question about what exactly that looks like and how it will move forward. So check out the USC website for that.
We have 4 minutes left. Melissa, do we have another audience question we can take?
Sure, yes, we do. So this question is from Anonymous. There are a lot of developers coming into the U.S. without a U.S. footprint, but significant experience in the developing world. Does developing in tougher places make you equipped to develop in the U.S. or the EU?
All right, John.
Yeah, I'm going to say maybe. I mean, I think the reality is, so yeah, first of all, applaud them for making the effort to come here and help us develop, and applaud them for the work they're doing in the development world. In the United States, we have 50 different energy fiefdoms, right, in 50 different states. And as developers, understanding those different policy levers, the revenue models on storage in these different states, I mean, it's hard enough. And I think we've got a really great A team of folks out doing this. And the more developers you bring in the market, the better. If push comes to shove, it's about problem solving. And if you've done that in a really hard situation in a developing world, you can problem solve the situation in Massachusetts around the Clean Peak Standard, right? It's more important that you understand the dynamics of those policies, how they affect your projects, and how you're going to get them built, because that's really the most important part.
We're going to go to our last question here. Just going to do a quick go around. Are you a climate optimist or are you climate pessimist in the wake of the IRA, and why? John.
I'm a climate optimist. I think we have an awesome industry that's as the guy from Blue Planet said earlier today, we're going to solve this problem. The IRA is one of the key tools of getting it done. I also just argue that this is the decade we're going to get it done. I mean, if we don't execute by 2030, there's no way we're hitting these 2050 goals. So we can't sit on our laurels now. We've got to get to work.
Yeah, perpetual optimist, right? But the train has left the station.
Your shirt
I think is
says
the
it.
term. Yes, right. It sure does. We're in the energy transition, and climate change is already upon us. So you have these two forces kind of already at work, and then the interaction of those two things, like that's going to be the world that we live in. And there's a lot of thermal energy out there in the system that I'm concerned about. And I think we're in for one hell of a ride in the near term. And then I'm hopeful that all the great brains all around the world that are inspiring us so much are going to just make some major innovation steps and save our collective asses. So that's what I think.
Yeah.
All right, Nico.
I like Porter's perpetual or eternal optimist position. I'm a climate pragmatist. I think that the train has left the station. Our children are, I'll say, forever doomed to live in a world that is nothing like what our grandparents lived in. And the best we can do is to slow down the chaos that is coming, and the best we can hope for is to get to a place of stasis that we can manage for generations, for centuries to come, the impact on our children that as a humanity we have borrowed from future generations for our industrial revolution, for our electrified lives, for our comfort, right? And that comfort has extended our lifespan. It has given us the kinds of joys that no other civilization has ever known. Thank you, future generations, for that privilege. We nevertheless have the obligation, as eternal optimists, to believe in human ingenuity to find a way around it, right? So there probably is a solution still waiting for us that will massively curb the damage that we've done to the planet. But I am a climate pragmatist. I think that we just have to manage right now the impact that the future generations are going to feel.
All right, Mr. Cooney. Second to last here.
I agree a lot with everything everybody said already, and the passing of the IRA is unfathomable to the Scott of 5 years ago. I couldn't even conceive of us being able to pass a climate bill 5 years ago. So it makes me more optimistic. As long as there are people whose career, well-paid career, is to go around to rural places and scare people away from renewable energy projects, I will remain a little pessimistic, and that is just being straight up honest. The number of people who work in this industry who do not know this fact, that there is billions of dollars of fossil-funded FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, being created around any clean tech out there, the number of people that still don't even know that that exists, that that's a thing, that's a career field you can pick, that blows me away. So cautious optimism.
Yeah.
Gosh, I don't want to end on a negative note, but I think I echo the climate realist perspective. I mean, we have to acknowledge that if you feel discouraged by something, you're less inclined to do something about it. So I don't want everyone to feel like we have no hope, because there's so much innovation that Josh was talking to. We're going to make a lot of breakthroughs. The IRA is historic. But the world is just complicated. We're going to make progress in one area. We're going to have challenges in another. Let's not forget, we're speaking as climate change is already happening. Puerto Rico, 1.4 million people are out of power right now. The storms are getting stronger. They're becoming more frequent. The wets are getting wetter. The dries are getting drier. California's heat wave was unprecedented. It took an alert message to get everyone to turn down their AC just a little bit to keep our grid functioning. So it's about future generations. It's also about us here today and the choices that we make. And so I don't know. I'm optimistic we will make a lot of progress on a lot of things. I'm realistic that it's going to come with challenges, but all we can do is work to solve them, short of throwing our hands up and saying, let's give up on this whole experiment called life. So we don't have much of a choice. Let's get to work and let's make it the best future we can.
I'll back clean up on this. I think I'm reminded by one of my favorite sayings is a Confucian saying: those who say something is impossible should not interrupt those who are doing it. And we are going to see the very well-developed, several billion-dollar a year influence peddling industry start to honk at the IRA like it sought to undercut the Obama stimulus plan with Solyndra, like a phony made-up scandal. And I think our rate of success, our chance of actually pulling this off, will be directly correlated with our willingness to get rid of the magical thinking, to get rid of the Pollyannish view, and actually treat public communications and politics like the full contact sport that it is. And you either play, and you play hard to win, or you're gonna get your butt handed to you. It's just because we just have, the gas industry isn't stupid. They're looking at a $370 billion displacement plan, and they're not going to say, oh gosh, we'll just transition to be like a, just an energy management home software company. We're good. ExxonMobil, we'll just shut it down and move over to solar installation. So they're coming for us because we just disrupted them like we should. And the question is, are we ready for their reaction? And I think, so I'm a climate wait and seer. With that, I want to thank our awesome panel, our 14th convening here. It's great. Thank you so much. And thank you for having us. Thank you for tuning in to our roundtables. We're going to keep them going because they've become quite popular, and there's a lot of fun to do. Like the most fun I have in the quarter is when I get to talk to these folks. So it's good. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks.
Thanks, everyone.